Good morning guys, as promised here's a video on how to cast on. So as you can see I've got my white pin already lined up at the front there. I'm just going to point that out to you and I'm just going to check that the machine is in tube setting. Casting on is really simple, so I'm going to walk you through the basic steps of how to cast on. So first things first, what you need is your yarn, your working yarn, and you're going to drop a tail into the middle of the machine and hook onto that first pin. And you're just going to crank the handle until the third pin lines up. And it is as simple as going over the pin, behind the pin, over the pin, behind the pin, over the pin, behind the pin, and you're going to continue to do that all the way around until you've done one full turn on the machine. So as you can see, I'm just doing that very slowly, and as I go I'm cranking the handle to make it easy for myself. So the pin will rise up and it will just grab it as you go, so take your time, and if you're unsure I've got a little tip at the end on how to keep an eye on this. All the way around to the other end, so once you get back to that white pin, I tend to slow down at this point just to make sure I don't keep going. So behind that last pin, and then what you're going to do is drop that into the yarn holder there. And I'm just going to show you about popping it in your tensioner as well. So tensioning is something that you will get to grips with per yarn that you're using. So this is double knit yarn and it's quite fine. So I'm going to pop that in the tightest hole on there, as you can see at the top. So now I've gone all the way around. You can see that what you will see is a bit of a pattern that's formed. So there will be two of the pins with the yarn showing, and then one it will be tucked behind, and that'll go all the way around. So from here you're just going to crank your handle really slowly, and there you go. I'm just showing you that pattern there. So there's 2, 1 tuck behind, 2, 1 tuck behind, 2, 1 tuck behind, and it will continue all the way around. So if you're not seeing that pattern, you know you've done a little bit of something wrong. So just go back and start again and follow the first steps. From here, I'm going to wind on for 4 turns, so 4 lots of that white pin coming back round, and I have reset my stitch counter as well. I'm going to go around 4 times really slowly just to make sure that those stitches are catching, and I'm keeping my eye all the time to make sure that the needles are grabbing that yarn as it goes through. So as you can see, that is 1 turn now. So as that tail comes back round, it's a really handy indicator, as well as obviously the white pin. So you know you've gone 1 turn, and obviously your stitch counter will count that as well. The reason I like to go slow for these four rows is just to make sure that I'm catching that stitch and that everything's going as it should. And then once I get to 4, I will crank it a little bit faster. So there you go, you can see that tail, it's in line with that white pin, and I know I've done 2 rows. I'm going to keep going for another 2 rows, just at this steady speed, taking my time, and you will see the stitches starting to form, and they should all look nice and even. You shouldn't have any lumps or bumps or anything hanging down other than your tail that's coming down from that white pin there. So this will be my 3rd row, so I'm going to crank for 1 more row, nice and slowly, and then I will speed up slightly, which obviously as you're working on projects this becomes great because it's so time saving. So that 4th row is coming round now. And there we go. So now I can crank a little bit faster, so I'm just going to secure my machine with my hand just because I'm not on the most stable work area here. And I'm going to crank for 15 rows. So if you keep watching that little stitch counter on the side there, it is quite accurate. I like to keep an eye on it though, so I always do try and keep a tally in my head as I'm going. Can be a bit more difficult when you're doing obviously 100 rows, but I do have a stitch counter app on my phone as well, which is quite handy. But yeah, so feel free to crank. As you can see from previous videos, I do use a drill attachment on this, so I'm not too precious. But even when I'm using the drill, I do tend to sort of count in tens just to make sure that my rows are accurate, because it can be really frustrating if you're doing quite a big project and you say you're doing 120 rows and then all of a sudden you've got 125 on one panel and 120 on another. I will give you a demonstration on how to do panel knitting on the machine as well, if that's something you guys would find useful. So I'm just at that 10 rows there, and now you can see that the fabric really is starting to take shape and it's starting to look quite good. Once I get to the end of these 15 rows, I will show you how to cast off as well. So that's a really useful thing to learn. Obviously, it's great being able to get it on the machine, but you also need to know how to get it off the machine. So I'm up to my 12th row now, so I'm just going to keep cranking for another 3 rows. When I get to around the 14 row mark, if I'm aiming for 15, I will start to slow down just so I don't go past that white pin. So there we are, so that's my 13th. And we're going to go around for 14, and as you can see, I've just started to slow down a little bit now. I'm just checking what's going on. untangling my yarn as I go as well. Sometimes you'll get natural tangles in the yarn, so just keeping an eye on that. I'm always keeping an eye on the project and the yarn as I'm going around, making sure it's feeding in comfortably and we're not getting caught up in that tensioner. So this will be my 15th row. And I'm just going to crank really slowly till I get to that white pin. So, as you can see, just noting there that we're on the white pin, I'm going to remove the yarn from the tensioner. Now, because I'm just showing this as an example, I'm not actually going to cut the yarn, but typically here you would feed this into the middle and you would cut the yarn. So obviously we're at the end of our project, we're going to cut the yarn. So this is a simple cast off. This is not one where we want a neat edge. This is just going to be cast off without trying to finish it off. Sometimes I'll do a different video to show you how to cast off differently, but sometimes when I've used waste yarn at the start and end of projects, again, which I will show you in another video, this is just the easiest and simplest way to cast off. You just simply crank the handle, crank it round 2 more times, and you will see your project just falls away from the machine. And then you can see it's just got caught there. But then you can see what it looks like. So that's 15 rows. So that gives you a good indication as to the length of your project. And there we go. Hope that was helpful, guys. Thanks for watching.